glad they put us a separation between us.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Jones, and I'm Executive Vice President of Meridian International Center, and it is such a pleasure to welcome all of you here today. I love talking about space, primarily because growing up, my dream was to be an astronaut, and I begged my parents to send me to space camp, so I feel like I'm living vicariously through all of you today. But some of you may be wondering, why Meridian? Why space? Meridian is a nonprofit, nonpartisan center for diplomacy. We were founded in 1960 as a partner of the State Department running international exchange programs. We've had over 180 heads of state who've been alumni of our programs, but fast forward 65 years, and the world looks drastically different. The challenges are even more complex, but diplomacy has, for the most part, stayed the same. So Meridian, our mission is to strengthen American leadership by really reimagining diplomacy, and we are expanding and opening diplomacy to leaders beyond government. We believe that the new diplomats are business leaders, governors, mayors, scientists, innovators, astronauts, athletes, and artists. These are the new leaders that are on the front lines of our global challenges and are really critical to helping to sustain and build our international partnerships. So everything that we do at Meridian helps to support these new diplomatic actors through global insights, through international connections and relationships and resources. And we have seen the power and the potential, as all of you here have as well, on the power of space to help strengthen international collaboration. And that is why we've launched a space diplomacy initiative to ensure that the needed international governance norms on space are advanced in a way that ensures the continued peaceful and sustainable use of outer space. So we are grateful to have you here today. We are so grateful for our continued partnership with the State Department. And I want to, before introducing our one of our keynote speakers, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So today's program is on the record and is being live streamed for a global audience. So hello to all of you at home. Agenda, you can see the agenda for today in your program booklet on your seat. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Rahima Kandahari, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Science, Technology, and Space Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Rahima is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service. Thank you for your service to our country for so many years. Prior to her role at the State Department, she served as the Dean of School of Applied Information Technology at the Foreign Service Institute. You can find her full biography in your program books. But again, thank you for joining us today, and please join me in welcoming Deputy Assistant Secretary Rahima Kandahari.
I just don't want to do disservice to science and technology, so I needed to bring my iPad, even though my team has already printed everything in a big fonts for me. But it's such a pleasure. Good afternoon, and it's good to see such a enthusiastic group of colleagues here, and like-minded colleagues that they care about space issues. And thank you to the Meridian International Center for hosting us here today and celebrating space diplomacy. I'm pleased, as I said, for the robust participation from private industry and the wider interagency, and of course, our close international partners. I'm sure they are there, but I have to find each and every one of you and say hello later. My name is, as Natalie mentioned, is Rahima Kandahari. I'm the acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Ocean, International Environmental, and Scientific Affairs, and my focus area is science, technology, and space at the U.S. Department of State. I've been with the Department of State for many, many years, and I don't want to put a date there. So you guys can read my bio. Maybe you will not find a date. So I lead efforts to promote American leadership and international cooperation in civil and commercial use of space. I oversee the largest dedicated space office in the State Department that work closely with other bureaus of the department that focus on space-related security matters, export controls, cybersecurity, and telecommunications policies. I want to start today's event by sharing how we think about space diplomacy at the State Department and how do we use the various tools of diplomacy to promote U.S. leadership in space around the globe. Our guiding star remains the long-term sustainability of outer space as set forth in the 2020 National Space Policy. We want to ensure that outer space is maintained for peaceful purposes, open for exploration, and preserved for current and future generations. The tremendous economic and scientific and, of course, security benefit of space only increase if we and other spacefaring nations continue to act responsibly, transparently, and safely. The stakes are real. Outer space is more contested, congested, and competitive than ever. There are roughly 12,000 satellites in space from dozens of countries. Ensuring those satellites do not collide with one another is a major concern and emphasizes the importance of space traffic coordination. The number is likely to triple by the end of the decade. Additionally, there are over 1 million pieces of space debris out there, and these space junks getting in the way of safe, secure space operations. When and if low Earth orbit, or LEO, as you all know, become unusable due to space debris, all spacefaring nations would no longer benefit from the multitude of societal and economic benefits from space that we are accustomed to, and we take it for granted. Solving these challenges will require strong American leadership, as well as close coordination with key allies. This is our consistent message in our bilateral exchanges with established and emerging space nations in a forum like UN Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, or as you all know, UN COPIUS. And here today with the space diplomats and policy experts from around the world. The State Department may not have the may not launch rockets. We don't drive rovers on Mars, or we are not maintaining a fleet of weather satellites like our interagency colleagues and partners do, but we do play a critical role within the wider US government space ecosystem. From helping NASA and other US agencies negotiate legally binding agreement with foreign partners to hosting bilateral space dialogues with a dozen partners to representing United States in multilateral fora, much of our work is government-to-government work would be actually familiar to diplomats all over and the ones they are here. But what I want to leave you with today is the growing importance of private sector in space and what we are doing at the State Department to facilitate commercial space diplomacy to better support US commercial space sectors. The United States continue to lead in almost every sector of the space economy, including launch, ground station services, manufacturing, human space flight, and remote sensing, and of course, telecommunications. In the coming year, we are expecting a surge of new commercial activities like space data centers, in space assembly and manufacturing, microgravity research, and space resource extraction. With that rapid growth in the commercial space sector, there has been a misconception that it's a Wild West up there in orbit. In fact, the US government is involved in many of these efforts as a partner, funder, and regulator. The State Department plays a crucial role in supporting the commercial space sector. We work to promote the US commercial sector internationally by advocating overseas on behalf of the US companies, by encouraging foreign countries to adopt US space regulatory approaches to encourage safety and interoperability, and by facilitating new market opportunities for the US space industry. The US space economy is currently valued at $140 billion, employing nearly 400,000 dedicated employees, but the downstream impact of space from logistics to agriculture to telecommunications undoubtedly touches many more lives. We include private sector advisors in the US delegation to the UN and seek their input on development of international best practices for space activities. We solicit these advisors through Federal Register notices prior to these meetings, so I would recommend and encourage the ones that are interested to keep an eye on these notices ahead of you in copious meetings. Working closely with our colleagues at the Office of Space Commerce, and I see a couple of them here, we have integrated industry representatives in many of our bilateral space dialogues with key US allies like France, Japan, and New Zealand. These meetings are what we call Track 1.5 dialogues, and through these, we hope to foster new commercial partnership opportunities and reduce barriers to entry into these key foreign markets. In conclusion, these are such a high, exciting times for all of us, and I'm getting excited already as you all see that I'm reading ahead of my notes. We are seeing a true renaissance in public interest in space. That's true not only in the United States, this is true around the world. Other countries see United States' ambitious plan to return with our partners to the moon and journey on to Mars are inspiring to them as well. And it makes them initiate their own space programs. This has created so many opportunities for us to expand and rethink how we conduct space diplomacy. I look forward to our conversation today and encourage us all to be bold, envisioning how together we expand the space economy and encourage the next generation of space leaders. With that, I do thank you, and looking forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pidas Kandahari, and thank you to the State Department for co-hosting this program alongside Meridian this afternoon. I am Frank Justice. I'm a vice president here at Meridian. Among other areas, I oversee our space diplomacy initiative, and you are stuck with me being your MC for the remainder of the afternoon. Pidas Kandahari mentioned the importance of commercial space to the State Department, but really it's to the entire U.S. space sector. And so I think it's fitting that we're going to start this conversation with a focus on the expanding space economy. And with that, I'd like to welcome our speakers to the stage. So first we have our moderator for this first session, Janice Starzyk, the Acting Director of the Office of Space Commerce, which is part of NOAA in the U.S. Department of Commerce. We have Sean Sonny Cantrell, who serves as the Director of International Engagement at Maxar Intelligence. David Kasova is the President of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. And finally, we have Jared Stout, who serves as the Chief Government Relations and Communications Officer at Axiom Space. Janice, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing everyone so I wouldn't have to. So I'm Janice Starzyk, the Acting Director of the Office of Space Commerce. And the Office of Space Commerce has a mission to foster the conditions for economic growth and technological advancement of the U.S. commercial space industry. So that means that everything that we do is for the benefit of industry, and we are here to help support industry grow in whatever means we can within the U.S. government. That generally means policy, but it also means regulation and operation of the space traffic coordination system. So I am pleased to have this distinguished group here today to talk about how the U.S. economy can grow not just domestically, but also abroad, and talk about what the overall international market looks like for all of us, and how that really contributes to what we're doing at home. So I'm going to ask each of you questions and then open it up to the audience, but I have more prepared in case you're all a little bit shy today. So I'm going to start with Jared. So actually, before I start, can I have you each describe your jobs a little bit so that we know who we're talking to and why? So I'll start with Jared on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks to Meridian, Frank, and to the State Department. Pidas Kandahari, it's great to have you here. And we're really lucky to have such great partners at the State Department, at the Commerce Department, here at Meridian. This is a great organization. It's a great opportunity and good conversation. So I am the Chief Government Relations and Communications Officer at Axiom Space. So I'm responsible for leading all of our public policy globally. So that includes U.S. government policy, our international government policy, state and local, and managing our relationships across all of our verticals. So just a quick hit on Axiom Space. So we have three main business lines. We're building the world's first commercial space station, Axiom Station, which we will have the first module of launched in 2027. We do private astronaut missions, which includes international government partners across the world. Our next one is coming up and hot off the presses. We just announced it today, no earlier than May 29th. And that one's, yes, that one's going to include India, Hungary, and Poland, all sending national astronauts. And then our last is that we're building the spacesuits that the Artemis astronauts will use to walk on the moon. So the first woman to walk on the lunar surface will do so in one of our spacesuits. And we're very excited about that. It's a really cool opportunity. And as we know, the Artemis Accords, the Artemis program is the quintessential international diplomatic effort.
Thank you. David Cavosa.
Thank you, Janice. David Cavosa, the president of the Commercial Space Federation, formerly known as Commercial Spaceflight Federation, until we rebranded recently. I was a bit surprised. I thought we were just going to sit up here and talk amongst ourselves. I didn't know there was going to be an audience. I didn't know we were going to be live broadcast across the world. I didn't know there would be press. So I'm going to have to self-edit throughout this. But this is an intimidating room for me. I've got my idol in the room, Eric Stallmer, the person I want to be when I grow up. We've got Richard Del Bello here, who hired me into the space industry 20 years ago, my first boss. That's Dr. Scott Pace here, who runs the Space Policy Institute, where I got my degree from. We have one of my current bosses, Jared Stout, to my left, who's on the board as an officer of CSF. So I'm nervous. I don't know what I'm going to do here today.
We'll get through it together.
You'll be
It's gonna
fine.
It's going to be okay.
And Sean?
Janice, thank you. And Des Kandahar, thank you as well. And all the dignitaries in the room. And Frank, Meridian, Arena from OES. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out my better half, also a Foreign Service officer from sitting over here, Jenny Young. She has the hard job of running the chief of staff for one of the major directorates, one of the major bureaus in the State Department. Thank you. So I spent 30 years in government as a special operations officer and then as a diplomat, a military attaché. So there's a bit, you know the movie Forrest Gump? That's me, because what do I know about space? And so at one point, 10 years ago, when I was promoted to a senior rank, I believe that the Air Force Personnel Department saw special operations and an opening for a senior officer to be the chief operating officer for the Air Force office that builds space sensors, known as special projects. And I think it was a late Friday afternoon, they simply said, put Cantrell over there. So that was my shoe into the space industry. So Maxar grabbed me about 2 years ago and they said, we need a diplomat who can talk space as well. It's absolutely fantastic. So Maxar, for a lot of you have seen Maxar on CNN, and you pick up your phone, you look at a Google image, you're looking at a Maxar image. So 3 wings to Maxar. We support the US government. We do about 90% of the US government's baseline imagery. We support international governments, over 70 international partner nations. Important part here is we don't do any business with what the State Department says as our states of concern. So no bad guys, and we do that of our own volition. And some other ones we add to the list that we just don't think that they are proper actors. And then the third part is we build satellites. We build satellites and operate our own satellites, and we build them for some of these partner nations as well. I think that's a fair point to stop at.
And you'll find, probably across this room, everyone either ended up in the space industry because they wanted to from the time they were little, or they just happened to, get picked here at some point. And once you're here, it's pretty tough to leave. So we all love it equally. So I'll start with Jared. And Das Kandahari did a great job of setting this up. But as we look at the U.S. leadership and a lot of different elements of space and how that functions internationally, we've really been the lead in low Earth orbit and particularly in human spaceflight for many years. Now, how do you see us establishing pathways to leverage commercial to emphasize that leadership, and what does LEO commercialization look like for you?
So I think the sort of the big headline out of this question, at least in my mind, is as the United States is going through the current political back and forth about what is our role in the world, what should be the actual position that the U.S. government takes in industry, I think the direction that we're headed, and we have been headed this way for really since 2010 or so, is that the United States is the indispensable partner. We're the ones that know how to do all this. We have the intellectual capital. We have built up all of this experience, this workforce that we've developed specifically at NASA when we're talking about human spaceflight, is a national asset. It is something that is special about us, that nobody else can claim that they have. And we need to figure out, one, how do we preserve that national asset? There's a lot of different ways that we can go about doing that, but one way that we have been doing it over the last 15 or so years is that we've really been investing in private industry and human spaceflight in order to develop that capability outside of the US government. I think the trick to this is how we do it in a way that is surgical, planned, and strategic, as opposed to just cutting budgets for the sake of hitting a budget target. Now, I don't begrudge the Office of Management and Budget for trying to figure out how to fit numbers into a box. That's their job. It's what they're supposed to do. It's their purpose is to see, this is the numbers that you have, how do you make all the pieces fit into that box? I think it's the responsibility of Congress and the political appointees that have been confirmed by the Senate and are accountable to them to make sure that the decisions that are getting made by the political branches are actually doing what's necessary to preserve our leadership position. And part of that is making sure that there are room for our international partners to contribute and have a consistent, ongoing, and predictable role with the United States. If they don't have that, if they cannot rely on us, China is waiting to take them. China wants them bad. They're looking for them in every possible opportunity. And when we withdraw from any area of leadership in the world, the Chinese are right behind us, ready to jump in. And I think what gets lost on us sometimes is that the mantra of America first does not mean America alone. It means America leading and bringing our international partners along with us for that common goal. So what's the future of international cooperation? I think my friend Scott Pace is very fond of saying, we'll never out-centrally plan China. So we have to use the thing that's really special about us, and it's the innovation and the entrepreneurial spirit of the United States. We have to invest in that and find ways for our international partners to come along with the business side, with US leadership backing us up through policy, regulation, and law.
Great. Speaking of America First and the administration and its current policies, the Trump administration has shown a lot of interest in space and specifically use of commercial space within the government. So David, what are you and your members most focused on in this time?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, what Jared said, because that's going to be my answer repeatedly today as one of my member companies. But Jared stole a little bit of my thunder on the topic of China and competition. It is a talking point, and it is a concern that we are looking at all day, every day, is the advancements that the Chinese are making in their space program because of the centrally planned economy. When I think about what the CSF is focused on right now, I think the word that comes to mind first is elevate. And what I mean by that is we're really spending a lot of energy right now trying to elevate space and commercial space in the conversations within the new administration and on the Hill aggressively to say, listen, the Trump administration did a great job in its first run with elevating space out of the Air Force and creating the U.S. Space Force. And we think it's time to elevate space within the Department of Commerce. We think that the Office of Space Commerce needs to be elevated up to the level of the Secretary. We think that there's some additional authorities that need to be granted to the Office of Space Commerce through mission authorization.
I didn't put them up to this.
No, you did not. We think within the Department of Transportation, the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, AST, that needs to be elevated out of FAA and sit at the Secretary's level as it was originally intended. So those elevations are things we're spending a lot of energy on right now. Another word I think about quite a bit every day is the word unleash, which is that we're very aggressively pursuing the modernization of export control regulations, which is something obviously the State Department cares deeply about, as does Commerce. Within the FAA, Office of Commercial Space Transportation, there are several launch and reentry regulations that are slowing down the industry that we're trying to sort of modernize and move forward and make more efficient. We're not trying to get rid of regulation. We're just trying to make it a little bit more friendly so that we can compete on the international stage and compete with a country in China that is not governed by the same sort of rules of the road that the United States is governed by and that U.S. companies are governed by. So I'll sort of pause there. I mean, very much elevating space and unleashing commercial industry to compete globally.
Well, that sets us up pretty perfectly. So Sean, from a Maxar perspective, how do you see regulation affecting U.S. business both inside and outside the country?
If you can stand some good news, I'm going to heap praise on Commerce and State. And that's unheralded right now since the change in administrations. But there's some positive news there. So we do business with 70 partner nations, and we will not tell you about you, or vice versa, unless you specifically in contract say, I would like that country to know. We want to do a trilateralization. So there is a bit of privacy that we have to talk about, but I'll give an oblique reference to 3 different partner nations that we've engaged with to building on business. We are a company for profit. Maxar, we've invested billions in the last year, putting 6 new satellites, 30 centimeters. So we can pick a basketball-sized object up on anywhere, 6.5 million square kilometers, not anywhere on the face of the earth, but just about anywhere, any given day, day, night. We can do pretty well with that same size object on the ocean surface. A little bit of trouble with whitecaps. So getting this technology to partners who need it for not just military usage, of course there's military usage, but what about responding to typhoons? What about responding to earthquakes to say, hey, global South nation, those bridges you wanted to go to get humanitarian relief up north or down south, wherever hypothetically, after the hurricane, after the earthquake, they're gone. Oh, and if it's something that's classified, which we're not, we're an unclassified, commercially available service, they can take it, let's say we're doing business with the Ministry of Defense in that country, and rip it and tear it and give it to the local first responders in whichever country. So that technology probably doesn't need to be ITAR controlled. But the good news is we have had really good luck since the change of administration with moving forward, fast-tracking 3 nations that were on hold for more than a year previously. It just wasn't, and our compliance department, our engineers, our attorneys, they are, I think I use this correctly, they're fulsome in their ability to look at all the issues with nations to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that with it. So it's a good news story, the regulation, within the United States. Outside of the United States, it's not necessarily a level playing field. I'll be candid. There are protections that are de facto in place in Europe and elsewhere that effectively put a hand up to U.S. commercial satellite companies, imaging companies, to doing business in those countries when perhaps we are the best and certainly one of the most cost efficient. So I end it with, it's more good news than bad, but there's work to be done.
My colleagues at State and inside of OSC have been tracking EU space law and its eventual release, potentially in the next couple of months for a couple of years now. And it's a matter of concern for U.S. companies and the U.S. government certainly. But still nobody's actually seen the text. So it's all rumor and innuendo until it finally comes out. But you sparked another thought in terms of our advocacy role. So the DoD has done a very good job of using Maxar and other companies to say, okay, here is unclassified imagery that I am able to share with my colleagues, and that makes it useful. They can share with their partners. They can do more military diplomacy doing that. But how do we get DoD to start relying on commercial imagery for more than that as its purpose? How do we start getting them to integrate the commercial companies into their operations? So I know this is a tough question to ask about your customers here, but maybe David's better position to say.
Yeah, I mean, one of the unfortunate answers, when I was with the commercial SATCOM side of this industry for the first decade of my career, back in the early 2000s with Richard, we were trying to get the Department of Defense at that time to buy commercial SATCOM smarter and rely to the maximum practical extent on commercial and do multi-year leasing get much more favorable contract terms. And just now, 20 years later, we're seeing progress within how the DoD thinks about commercial SATCOM, which is maybe 80% of their requirement is commercial, not MIL-SATCOM. So, you know, I don't have any great answers there, Janice. It's going to take a long time, but the good news is I think commercial SATCOM has sort of paved a way. You know, I've seen some good things out of the Space Force and out of SDA and out of the, you know, the commercial space office within Space Force doing CASR. I mean, some of the folks in this room will remember Dick Beneke is here as well from State, that 20 years ago we were talking about, you know, the commercial augmentation in the airline industry and how they could do something similar for SATCOM. And now I see money appropriated and a program exists and folks within the Space Force moving forward smartly on that. So progress has been made, but there's still a long way to go. I'm sure our friends at Maxar and Planet would say the same.
First, I'll pause and see if there are any questions from the audience, if anyone's feeling brave.
Hi, I'm Caroline. With all of these new technologies rolling out and trying to get them to be more utilized across the board, how do different companies think about protecting intellectual property and cybersecurity vulnerabilities? Oh, I'm sorry.
We heard you.
Our technology is patented, but there is a shelf life to patents, and it's proprietary. And then we put in safeguards, cyber safeguards. And to say, I can't say how many probes that we receive, intrusion attempts per day, but it's not in the dozens. It's in the hundreds. And we do a really good job at putting that. So some partners may say you're stodgy. Well, we have to be, because let's say that country X is just depending on it, and then country Y decides to roll across their border, and then country X gets it cut. So, okay, a practical example. We don't talk about countries you do business with, but because Ukraine delivered our information to CNN, it's sort of an open secret. We called the attack. We called the invasion in November 17th of 2021, and we said, this is not the normal Zapad Western military exercise, because the placement of not just all the troops and munitions and everything, which were part and parcel to previous exercises, 2 field hospitals. Always before, the Russian military had said, small unit medics and local hospitals will take care of any training injuries. But when they put 2 field hospitals, we turned that over. So we have to be incredibly diligent in our cyber practices to customers also about, you can access it through here, not through there. Just this pathway. And then maybe we will hold back some other pathways in case that becomes in extremis, that pathway is cut by a hostile actor. If that answers your question.
Anyone?
No.
Any other questions?
Should I wait for a mic?
Right here.
Oh, there's too many.
Oh, there's 2.
Too many. Thank you. Thank you all for your remarks. My name is Constanza Vidal Bustamante. I'm a fellow with the Center for New American Security. We're a think tank in DC, starting to work on some space policy programs. So I'm excited to be here and represent the CNAS on this. Something that I've been trying to track and that came up in your conversation and your remarks already about kind of the importance of American leadership in the space, but also very much cognizant of needing our allies and partners to work together on this. I'm curious to hear if you can comment on your views on the role of the private sector in facilitating both, facilitating that narrative, I guess, of bringing American leadership along with allies in terms of governance of space, but in terms of also kind of from a more geopolitical point of view. Do you think there's something that the private sector can offer in the space beyond what government can do, or how do you think about the role of government in that versus what you can offer as kind of a third party?
Oh,
Did you write that question for her?
I've got a lot of thoughts, but you want to start?
I'm going to start. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the question, because that's exactly why we're here. So I'm going to use a couple examples from Axiom Space to demonstrate, I think, what you're talking about. So the first I'll use is our private astronaut missions. So it's a bad name. We really should call it something else, because what we're really talking about is astronaut missions that are non-NASA folks that are going to the International Space Station. And so far, Axiom Space has built this whole pipeline of countries, some of which are partners to the International Government Agreement for the ISS, some of them are not. And what we have found is that there's a tremendous number of countries out there that have been wanting to do things in human spaceflight, have been wanting to do research in microgravity, but because of the way the agreements are structured and how NASA does crew rotations and that sort of thing, there really wasn't many options for the expansion of additional countries to be involved in what was going on in the ISS. What Axiom Space is offering, first now with these astronaut missions, then next with Axiom Station, is an opportunity to greatly expand the number of countries that can be involved in this type of activity. The most magical part of that is that microgravity research needs big data. We need lots of opportunities in order to do that research. So we need opportunities for flight. We need astronaut time on various types of facilities in microgravity. We need rapid iteration. We need to be able to send things up and bring things down quickly and relatively cheaply in order to know what we found while we were up there and how do we apply it to things on the ground. At Axiom Space, we really believe that the key to unlocking this LEO economy, which we don't have right now, all we have right now is business cases, but unlocking that large LEO economy that will be self-sustaining, that Jared Isaacman, for example, has talked about in his confirmation hearing, is about getting these commercial LEO destination platforms on orbit so that we can have that rapid iteration to develop things that will benefit life on Earth. At Axiom Space, we have this whole idea of driving innovation for the benefit of every human everywhere. And we really believe that once we figure out some of the answers to those fundamental questions, how our biology changes and how we can apply what we learn there to things on the ground, we're going to unlock a lot of things about human health that's going to completely revolutionize the way that we think about space research. Our Chief Strategy Officer, Matt Onler, is very fond of saying that he believes that in 15 to 20 years, we're going to all have things in our everyday lives that were manufactured in space, just like our iPhone, that we can't believe we ever lived without. And at Axiom Space, we're chasing that dream. And so I think the more that we bring international partners into that, the more scientists that we have working on these problems from a lot of different diverse backgrounds, the more humans that we have in space of different genders, different ethnicities, have people that have different types of, perhaps there are folks out there that have chronic disease that will be able to go to space at some point. So we can learn about how microgravity affects them, and we'll be able to unlock some of the things that will help make their lives better. All of that is part of an international ecosystem that we have to build to provide opportunity. The best way for us to do that is to lead the way and recruit other countries to join us. And the only way that we're going to do that is by making it a national priority for investment, because the race is for discovery. If the Chinese find it first, if countries that are hostile to Western values find it first, they're going to keep it. Whereas in the Western economic system, it is necessary for us to spread it around and have as many customers for that capability as possible. I hope that answered your question.
I would also talk about this in terms of commercial industry has a lot fewer restrictions on what they can go out and do internationally than the US government does. So I've been mostly on the commercial side working in international business, and this is my first government tour. So, I went to our government colleagues in my private roles and said, this is what we're looking at doing. And they're like, that's great, go do it. Because I can't get behind that until I get through this entire chain of approvals and make sure everybody's on board with it. And then we're going to have to make sure no other companies are providing, we're not being anti-competitive. So there are so many steps in the way for discrete projects to get government approval, whereas a commercial company can go out and say, you know, oh, you're interested in developing this in your country? I can help you with that. And then the US can come on board and say, we support that, as opposed to being the first out of the gate. So there's a lot more flexibility that commercial governments have in diplomacy. And as we talked about, you know, it's much easier for commercial technology to be shared internationally than government-owned technology. So there's a lot of ways in which we can facilitate you know, space diplomacy, international business through the commercial arm than we can as easily in the government side.
May I take a crack at it? We're fast and flat, the commercial industry. We have no choice to be. We're for profit. We answer to shareholders or to a private board, in our case, Maxar's case. So this is a real world example. I won't share the nation, but on Thursday, this past week, we were contacted by a major Southeast Asian nation and said, we want this. We want it on Tuesday. We want to present it to our president on Tuesday. How serious are you? I get on the phone with the U.S. Embassy. How serious are they? They're serious. They just are not great at planning. Do they have budget for it? Yes, they have budget for it. I called the team and I said, guess what we're doing? You have the middle of next week off. But this weekend, we're all working. We're going to put this proposal together and we're going to deliver it. And the part I really want to come to is good neighbor policy. I don't like sentences that begin with I. I'd rather talk about you. But at one point in my career, I was a commandant of the U.S. military attaché school. So trained all the military attachés to go around the world. And I never could write the misconception that was being taught, the wrong, really, that don't deal with industry. It's just going to be bad. There's going to be something non-compliance. You're going to get in there. I'm like, that's wrong. That's what the attorneys are for. I never could write that. So I have taken a little step to write it in private industry by going to embassies. And for anyone who said, well, you're asking their permission? No, we're not. We'll ask if there's any red lines, but it's information because the last thing that any U.S. ambassador wants is country X just contacted the Ministry of State Security and they're going to do something with them on Tuesday. So the good neighbor policy, we can move fast and flat, keep the U.S. officials informed that are here and at our embassies abroad. And I will offer, if it's fine, when I go to these meetings at Ministries of Defense, hey, I would like to bring the U.S. Air Attaché. It's under her portfolio for space. Any problems? No, we don't care, Sean. And the Air Attaché is like, thank you so much for bringing me to that, because it just facilitates the final yes. So we're fast and flat. And I don't mean that just Maxar, but it's the commercial industry. You have to be.
Yeah, and I'll add to this because I think this is a really good point. The embassies and the U.S. Commercial Service and our friends at OSC have been really helpful for developing all of the relationships that we have with countries that we're working in. I mean, at any given time, I'm probably tracking 50 engagements with different governments around the world. And it's a lot to keep track of. Being able to have that partnership with the State Department, with the U.S. Commercial Service officers that are stationed in these places, and being able to utilize that expertise has been super helpful. I think what Des Kanahari said in your opening remarks about business being a tool, being a leverage point for diplomacy, I think is a great opportunity. You just expanded your workforce, you expanded your tools, you expanded all of the reach that you have in all of these different business communities in all of these different countries. And like for me, my top priority is supporting U.S. national objectives. That as a company, that is the best place for us to be, is to be supporting the national objectives of our country, and being able to support our customers and finding ways to make all of those pieces fit together to build that larger ecosystem that we need in space. And at the end of the day, U.S. diplomatic power can be significantly leveraged through the business community. We just have to find ways to be better partners and find ways to utilize those partnerships.
Okay, can I ask one more since we started a little late? So we talked a little bit about, well, we talked a lot about China. We talked about export. I mean, in my view, modernization of export will allow us to counter influence as much as anything else. You know, we've held back our companies from being able to compete in ways that they are unrestricted. What other dynamics do you see in international space cooperation, international space business? I'm going to start with you and go down the line.
Sure. So I think the biggest one for us right now that we're really trying to get our arms around is mission authorization. I think that's, you know, I'm so exhausted talking about this. I feel like I've spent my whole life talking about mission authorization. I'm going to die talking about mission authorization.
We're going to solve it this year.
But this is, I mean, this is just a really important part of not just, it's not just an international thing. I mean, it's for our own country. We need to know what are people doing, what orbits are they in, and it's all connected to space traffic coordination, right? Like, we're going to have humans in orbit. We need to have certain assurances associated with space traffic coordination, indemnification, and the mission authorization schemes that go along with it, because we're protecting human life. When we talk about Earth observation, you know, those satellites need to also be protected because same thing. You're talking about very real world implications when we lose access to Earth observing capability. That's, to me, that's the biggest thing is the space traffic coordination, the mission authorization, and how those pieces fit together for our international partners.
I strongly agree. David?
Jared, as a member of the board of CSF, how much is it worth to you if I get mission authorization solved?
So much, so much.
Listen, I'll just cover one item, which is very much a hot topic right now that we're struggling with, which is when it comes to international cooperation, we've brought so many international players into, and I think Mike Gold is on the next panel, and I'm sure he'll speak about this at great length as well, but we've brought so many international partners into NASA space programs right now, like Artemis, like the Gateway program, the International Space Station. And I'm worried that when I see early drafts and early rumors around what this NASA budget is going to look like, there's some substantial cuts into those programs that we're going to need to fight back on, because if we terminate those programs, or if those programs that have such great international cooperation and partnership and participation, if those programs get cut or substantially scaled back, those international partners, to what Jared said earlier, are going to not only be very angry with us, but they're going to start looking for other ways to get into space. And the Chinese are going to be right there the next day saying, hey, why don't you bring your money and your technology and your interest over here and we'll partner with you. So that's my worry.
Can I add one more to fast and flat? We're engaged. We have to be engaged. We have to be out there and beating the bushes. So when I say country X, country Y, Ukraine and Russia, and that travesty, we also help with nations that need to understand where do they put their limited irrigation ability by looking from space to look down and go, it's not effective there, whatever you're doing. We can just tell how much moisture is on that field. Do something different. We can turn, what we just said about, we can turn the sensor on the satellite and we can image another spacecraft when it's not responding, saving companies indemnification, billions of dollars. Why isn't it working? Why didn't that array deploy? Or hopefully, can you regain orbital mechanics control of it? So, and the last part I'll say on engagement is, we're at virtually every international space and space conference there is. So anyone who wants to talk to Maxar, please, the 18th through the 21st in St. Louis, the GeoInt conference, please grab me. I will set up a meeting with you and our CEO. I send him all around the world. I think he's in Saudi Arabia right now. So he would be happy to do something in America with talking to any of you.
So just before we wrap up, I want to say, thank you, of course, to having us here, and what a great conversation. Both, state and commerce, we are here to support industry. We're here for all of you, and I want to encourage you all to bring forward any issues that we might be able to help with, and take conversations like this a little bit more in depth to figure out what ways we can really help our U.S. industry grow. But thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to Meridian for having us.
as is the case with almost any field, we're not going to advance American leadership without the private sector. And I think that was very much the case, conveyed very much the case here in this conversation on space. So with that, what's better than one dynamic conversation, 20 simultaneous dynamic conversations? And so we're going to take a little break so we can provide the environment for that. We're going to reconnect here at 3:20 for our next panel. Thank you.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
I think there's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
I think there's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
there's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
There's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
Center for Diplomatic Engagement serves as an educational and networking hub for diplomats to engage with the U.S. government and business community to look for solutions to shared global challenges.
Glad to have you at Meridian.
It's great to be back.
I think it's a wonderful center to bring people together from all over the world who have an understanding of global issues and can share perspectives, try to find common ground.
I think there's huge benefits for people working in a global institution, have an ability to go and live in different cultures and get experiences around the world.
This changes people's lives, and so I'm a huge supporter of these programs and their ability to shape the world and to open new doors for people around the world.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to start the second half of our program with some virtual remarks. This is a conversation on space diplomacy overall as well. So it's hard to have diplomacy without the United Nations. And it's a pleasure to welcome the director of the Office of Outer Space Affairs, which is based in Vienna, Arti Holamaini, who's going to provide some brief virtual remarks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arti Holamaini, and I'm Director of UNUSA, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you today on the role of diplomacy in fostering the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. First of all, I want to introduce you to the United Nations' best-kept secret, UNUSA. We are the smallest office with the most infinite mandate. I joined UNUSA just over a year and a half ago after a 2-decade career in the space industry, so I take a very action-oriented approach to strengthening space diplomacy. For those of you who might not know UNUSA, we are first and foremost Secretariat to COPUS, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and this is the historical seat of space governance. UNUSA was established in 1957 as a tiny expert unit set up to support COPUS right at the start of the first space age. It was intended to facilitate international cooperation and ensure that the then spacefaring nations did so with a shared understanding that their activities would be peaceful and for the benefit of all humankind. Throughout the Cold War, COPUS served as a neutral forum for dialogue on peaceful and responsible space activities, even among fierce adversaries. It is responsible for negotiating 5 international treaties, in particular the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, that lay the groundwork for how states interact in space and that serve as the foundation for the global space governance. We're now in the midst of a new era of space exploration, one where technological advances are allowing more countries to become spacefaring nations, where the return of humans to the moon is foreseen in coming years, and where manned missions to Mars and beyond are envisioned, not to mention the potential for commercial ventures to revolutionize how we live and work here on Earth. In this new space age, the growing number of actors, both national and commercial, further reinforce the need for strong multilateral institutions and diplomatic efforts that can address new challenges that threaten the future sustainability of space, including, for example, the increasingly congested nature of the low Earth orbit, the need for global coordination on space traffic, and the necessity to coordinate on new lunar activities. COPUOS has grown from 18 initial members to 104, with more countries joining every year, and the committee is responding to these challenges. In recent years, it has reached consensus and published guidelines for nations to adopt on debris mitigation and on the long-term sustainability of outer space. The newly created Action Team on Lunar Activities Consultation, ATLAC, is deliberating on critical issues that will shape the safe, peaceful, and transparent exploration of the Moon. In a few weeks, COPUOS member states will also begin negotiating a new set of principles on space resource utilization. And a new proposal before the committee seeks to ensure the input of all stakeholders, including industry, on crafting an international mechanism for facilitating space traffic coordination. Since the beginning, the United States has been a leader in space diplomacy. US advocacy was instrumental to the founding of COPUOS in 1958, and the US has been a long-standing, firm and vocal proponent of both the committee and UNUSA, including through substantial material and in-kind support. Further evidence of this commitment to international space diplomacy is demonstrated by the Artemis Accords, where US leadership has brought together 54 signatories and counting to enhance governance and establish a common set of principles for peaceful, sustainable, and transparent cooperation in space. To paraphrase an African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. As humanity pushes further into the final frontier and seeks to traverse the great vastness of space, we must do so in cooperation with each other if we are to be successful. And for that, we need continued US support, leadership, and diplomatic engagement through COPUOS and other multilateral bodies to ensure that the exploration and use of space remains peaceful for all. I'm very grateful to you for having had me with you, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be with you in person. Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to have our second panel of the afternoon. I am pleased. This one is going to focus on strengthening peaceful exploration and use. We're going to focus a little bit on national security. With that, I want to welcome up our team led by Caitlin Poling, Foreign Affairs Officer with the Office of Space Affairs with the U.S. Department of State. Please, Caitlin, come on up. I mentioned that the director is in Vienna, and I know Caitlin is a specialist in Vienna and spent some time there at the UN office. Next, we're joined by one of the fathers of the Artemis Accords, Mike Gold, who is the Chief Growth Officer with Redwire Space. We have Chris Johnson, also no stranger to Vienna, spending a lot of time out there. He serves with the Secure World Foundation as the Director of Legal Affairs and Space Law. And finally, joined by a friend from the Embassy of Japan, Yosuke Kaneko, who serves as the First Secretary and Space Attaché. Welcome. Caitlin, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. Hello, everyone. As Frank said, my name is Caitlin Poling, and I'm a Foreign Affairs Officer in the Office of Space Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Now, our Office Director, Valda McManus, was originally supposed to be your moderator today, but she sends her regrets as she is at home welcoming her first grandchild to the family. So excited for our space baby. So our office is the State Department's lead for civil and commercial space diplomacy, so it is only fitting that I welcome you to our session on strengthening space diplomacy. As Pidas Kandahari noted, our work in space diplomacy in the United States is guided by the National Space Policy of the United States of America, released in 2020 under President Trump's first administration. The NSP calls upon us to encourage and uphold the rights of nations to use space responsibly and peacefully, to peacefully lead, encourage, and expand international cooperation, and to create a safe, stable, and secure environment for space activities. I hope you enjoyed those remarks from UNUSA Director Arti Halamaini. The work she is doing in Vienna to advance international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space is a key example of space diplomacy at work. At COPUOS, member states are working to tackle complex problems like space traffic, the transparency of lunar activities and exploration, and the future of space resource activities. We appreciate Arti and the team for preparing those remarks, since Arti couldn't be with us in person today. So it's often said that space is hard, and we know that to do hard things, we often need to count on our partners. This is where the role of space diplomacy comes in. Turning to my colleagues on the panel, I am joined today by 3 esteemed colleagues who will help us highlight different aspects of space diplomacy. Mike Gold is the president of Civil and International Space at Redwire, and as noted already, prior to joining Redwire, he was NASA's Associate Administrator for Space Policy and Partnerships, and also served as Acting Associate Administrator for the Office of International and Interagency Relations, where he helped bring the Artemis Accords from concept to reality. Christopher Johnson is, as noted, Director of Legal Affairs and Space Law at the Secure World Foundation, and often a mainstay at COPUOS with us, including serving as a U.S. expert last year on our Space Resources panel, so thank you for that. And Yusuke Kaneko serves as the first Secretary and Space Attaché at the Embassy of Japan in the United States, advancing U.S.-Japan cooperation in space. He's relatively new to DC, having arrived in September, but he has over 20 years of experience at JAXA, including at headquarters, contributing to human spaceflight programs such as the International Space Station, Artemis, and Deep Space Science missions, in collaboration with industry, academia, government, and international partners. So let's start off first with a question to all of our panelists. So why is space diplomacy important in your view? What would you say to people who ask why we need space diplomacy when we have so many challenges here on Earth? Who would like to start off?
I'll start off. I can give 2 answers. The first answer is maybe a bit more academic. And that's, we're going to a place which is a shared domain, which is outside of national territory. You know, when you look at the Outer Space Treaty, the exploration and use of outer space, space law governs an area outside of state territory, and it governs our activities there. So because we're active there, but other nations are also active in the space domain, it is absolutely logical that we would be engaged in international discussions to discuss what we're going to do. The practical answer, though, is you know, we have to be at these discussions. We have to engage in international diplomacy because it's going to happen whether we're there or not. The normative discussions on what norms and rules should be governing the space domain is going to happen, is happening at the United Nations level. We need to be there. And this is, you know, I think we've already quoted Scott Pace, so I'll do it again. This is axiomatic and simple and true when he says that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
I like that.
I can go next.
Yeah, go.
Well, thank you very much for having me on this panel. It's a great honor. And regarding your question, I kind of ask that question to myself all the time. Since I assume my position as space attaché here in Washington, D.C., because being a space attaché is about space diplomacy and being in the center of that. I kind of, you know, come to 2 lines here where, you know, as you said, we have Earth-based issues. If you go down the list of the SDGs, air pollution, ocean pollution, global climate change, there are tons of things that confront us. But to me, as working in the space field for a long time, I think space is really the capability that really addresses these global challenges. Communication, navigation services, remote sensing, all kinds of these things are really the enabler to address these global challenges. So I think that's a very important piece. And what's important is that you know, one single nation can't really bring together all of these assets. So hence we need international cooperation. So I think that is the real pillar here, and that international cooperation means a lot in various dimensions, but it could be the sharing of data or sharing of assets or sharing of knowledge, so it could be interpreted in many ways. But I would say that space diplomacy is really the enabler in bringing together the countries together to collectively address the global issues.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll give a succinct answer. It's good for business. Yeah. We need space diplomacy because we need it for space commerce to be successful. And going back to the Artemis Accords for a moment, and by the way, I love being the father of the Artemis Accords because I don't have to pay tuition for that. My actual son, like that gets very expensive, believe me, as opposed to the Accords. If you look at some of the principles of the Accords, for example, interoperability. How important is interoperability to the success of having a business climate where we can function? And if we get up to the moon, Mars, and it's Beta versus VHS, and now I'm showing how old I am by just referencing that. Who remembers Beta versus VHS, right? It's going to be a problem. So if we can't get space diplomacy right, we are not going to succeed from a business perspective. Transparency, which was mentioned, extraordinarily important. If we can't have a transparent environment, we are not going to succeed with commercialization. Safety zones, making determinations relative to extracting and utilizing space resources. These are all going to be critical issues for the private sector to succeed, and that won't occur if we're not first successful with space diplomacy. And as was mentioned, nothing brings us together like space. I was actually having a conversation about some challenging space funding issues that we're starting to have, or have always had. And the CEO of Redwire was asking me, well, where's the Republicans, where's the Democrats? And I'm like, in the same place. It's one of the few areas, space, where you really bring Republicans, Democrats, different countries together. Space is so difficult, so expensive, as was mentioned, that it just brings us together as humanity like nothing else can. So I'll just end by saying that thanks to space and thanks to space diplomacy, we can have less Star Wars, more Star Trek.
Well, now I have a more specific question for each of you. So starting with Mike, as we've already discussed, you previously served at NASA and are one of the architects of the Accords. Could you tell us a bit more about what inspired you to draft the Accords and why those are so significant for space diplomacy?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the Accords didn't actually begin with space diplomacy per se or norms of behavior, which they focus on. Really, it came from the fact that when we look at beyond low Earth orbit human space flight in America, failure hasn't just been an option, it's been a certainty. That since Apollo, we have failed to sustain a program, Republican, Democrat, every administration since then. And during the first Trump administration, we were very fortunate to have Space Policy Directive 1, driven by Scott Pace and the White House. And SPD 1, as we might recall, was the direction to go back to the moon. Wildly popular among the international community, Japan, all over the world. And I remember having a conversation with Jim Bridenstine, and he was telling me how thrilled he was that he was getting letters, calls from his colleagues, fellow leaders of agencies, saying how wonderful it was that America was back in the game, back exploring the moon, leading again. And I was like, that's great, Jim. As a recovering attorney, get it in writing. And I was worried that while we had this outpouring of support for what would become Artemis and was then lunar exploration, that we needed a vehicle to make that support explicit and public. And so I was like, Jim, we need to convert it. And I've got an idea for a document, let's call it the Artemis Accords. And that name, by the way, hailing back to Star Trek, does anyone get the Star Trek reference with the Artemis Accords? Where's Scott? There, thank you, Scott. The Kittimer Accords, we got it. Kittimer Accords, which brought the Federation and the Klingon Empire together. So really the birth of the Accords was to help sustain the Artemis program. And then Jim said, hey, in addition to that, wouldn't it be wonderful to have the international partners sign on to norms behavior, leveraging the opportunity, the popularity of Artemis to create this peaceful and prosperous future with due regard, with norms that can bring us all together. And I, of course, said it's a great idea. Called Gabriel Swinney, Department of State, there from the beginning, Jonathan Margolis, and the next thing you know, we developed the Accord. So the idea, yes, was space diplomacy and bringing the world together, but it was really birthed from a desire to have a sustainable program that would get America to the moon, and I look forward to us together accomplishing that goal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I will say, from our perspective in the Office of Space Affairs, the Accords have been a huge part of our space diplomacy moving forward. We have really worked to not view the Accords as circumventing multilateral fora or, the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, but using this block to help inform what we do as we're debating how to deal with the lunar activities consultation project that's underway, or how we're envisioning those principles into the space resource principles that Artie mentioned a minute ago. So it's been a really useful network as well that I don't even think was probably conceptualized at the beginning, but it's been just such a force multiplier in space diplomacy. So kudos to you for that.
Kudos to you and Valda and everyone in the United States and NASA OIR who have continued and grown it. I will say the Accords were always intended to be the beginning of a conversation, not an ending. And it's explicit in the Accords that what we develop would then flow to COPUOS. But the problem and the challenge with COPUOS is it doesn't move at the speed of business. And the Accords were intended as a vehicle to allow us to proceed with alacrity, to preserve peace, to preserve prosperity, and then flow it to COPUOS, other international forums, where hopefully the values of the Accords can continue to be adopted.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Turning to Kaneko, you are the space attaché from one of the United States' very closest partners in space, from the ISS, now commanded by a Japanese astronaut, congratulations, by the way, to the Artemis missions. And I know you touched upon a bit upon this already, but what role does a space attaché like yourself play in advancing space diplomacy, and what's next for the U.S.-Japan space relationship?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Honestly speaking, I consider myself as a rookie space attaché here because I'm fairly new here. But, the everyday life of a space attaché is really about understanding U.S. space policy and sharing of Japanese space policy, and coming to a communication where we can find common grounds, identify common areas where we can work together. So these are kind of like the daily life of myself. But I think this is really rooted under the trust that the U.S. and Japan has built over the long history of space cooperation. I would look back a little bit in the early days of the cooperation. It was more of a technological driven thing. For instance, we work together on the International Space Station, we deliver components, and we do like joint research activities together where we find common interests. So it was more of a technological driven cooperation. But as we move along, we have built this mutual trust and have come to share the same values and to promote the peaceful use of outer space. A very good example is about what Mike said about the Artemis Accords, where Japan was the first group of signatories to the Artemis Accords. And that really demonstrates Japan's strong commitment into working together with the US, of course, and with the international partners to set norms and guiding principles and to demonstrate good practices as we move along. Some examples I can give you about the actual practice we do is that in June, the Japanese lunar lander called iSpace is going to land on the lunar surface. And per Outer Space Treaty Article 11, we will be providing information to UN USA. This is part of securing transparency, as you said, transparency and also avoiding harmful interference, which is really at the heart of space law, as I understand. And another example is that, as we move along to the moon domain, there could be debris out there in the future. So Japan has been quite active in this debris removal guidelines and through Copious, and of course in our domestic initiatives as well. So we have been collaborating with the UK and also with the Republic of Korea in order to offer technical solutions on how to mitigate debris in cislunar orbit and also on the lunar surface. So these are quite some examples that we are proceeding right now.
Mm-hmm. With apologies, Caitlin, if I can take issue with something my colleague said, I have to revoke his rookie status because he was extraordinarily helpful in negotiating both the Gateway Agreement and the Artemis Accord. So just a wonderful job by this individual in particular. I also have to say, if there's no syntax errors and typos in the Artemis Accords, it's because of the Japanese. That the Japanese team did an amazing job capturing English mistakes that our team was making.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So far, I didn't find a Japanese character in it. So
I'm sure if we look close enough,
okay.
maybe more. But thank you to you and for.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely say that some of the very behind-the-scenes work of space diplomacy is negotiating those international agreements that underpin our bilateral and multilateral cooperation. Well, I'll quickly turn to Chris, and then we'll get to Q&A from the audience, because I know we're running short on time. So Chris, coming from an NGO, can you tell us a bit about how your organization interacts with governments to influence space diplomacy? As I mentioned, we've previously, the U.S. delegation has nominated you to serve as an expert advisor at a UN Copious meeting. Can you speak to that experience and why the voice of NGOs and the private sector are important in the multilateral organizations working in space?
Yes, certainly. So it's coming up on 15 years of Copious experience that I have. Originally, I interned at USA during Copious. And you know, my experience is at Copious, but at an NGO, we operate, of course, in Vienna at Copious, but also up in Geneva on security side of space, often in New York on the higher level at the UN. And we do this because we are a member of the ECOSOC. When you look at the primary organs of the United Nations, you see the Economic and Social Council as an NGO, as a member of civil society, because we're admitted to the ECOSOC and they've looked through our records and seen that we're up to date. We're allowed to attend and participate in meetings across the United Nations system, and that includes Copious. So what we do there, what you can do as civil society is you don't represent the views of governments, you don't represent the views of the member states of the UN, you represent all the other views of civil society, and that is, the scientific community, the commercial community, academia, all stakeholders of space. And why is that? This is especially important in the space domain. Again, look at Article 1 of the Outer Space Treaty. The exploration and use of outer space is the province of all humankind. It does not say member states of the United Nations or member states of Copious. Or member states of the states parties of the Outer Space Treaty. It's all of humankind. So everyone has a stake and an interest and is inspired and affected by what we do in the space domain. So because of that, we participate in the Copious system. We attend Copious for two reasons. One is to see what the conversations and the tensions and the anxieties and the groups of states, see what matters to member states in their discussions, see what they're getting hung up about, see what they're always making interventions about, to see what the international landscape is on space diplomacy. And that, when we go to Vienna, it informs our work for the rest of the year back in the States, that we know what the international tensions are. We go there to observe. But we also, as an observer, go there to participate, to inform the work of that committee by making interventions, by making statements, by assisting the health of that institution. So I brought copies. I think they were all taken already, but we have the Copious briefing book, A History of Copious, and its subcommittees, mandates, working groups, et cetera, et cetera. There were copies outside. They are for free as a civil society. We distribute those for free. And this year's Copious, we will have Spanish, French, and Russian translations of the Copious briefing book that we've done in partnership with another observer, Intersputnik, Russian observer organization, really to show the rest of the member states back in the observer rows we can cooperate and get along, and here's our Copious briefing book. So this is how we interact with Copious, but of course we act elsewhere across the UN system. I have colleagues who are interacting with the open-ended working group on responsible behaviors in space, making contributions to that. Sometimes it's technical contributions on how STM and can play a role in verification. My colleague Ian is in Shanghai in a conference on space traffic management put on by the Chinese Space Agency. So it's often to sum up, we can go where others cannot. And I think, Mike, at some point you said that secure world, what did you call us? You
were the Marines of space law and policy.
Well, thank you so much.
First on the front lines.
All right, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, and I'll say it's definitely very important for the diplomats and delegates in the room at these multilateral meetings to hear perspectives other than those of governments or space agencies. There are practical considerations that need to be taken into account. For example, what are the ramifications of these principles we're putting into text? What does that mean for the companies that are, about to go forth and partake in those activities? So it's very important to hear those diverse voices, and so we're very grateful for your participation at COPUIS and the work that you do. And I'll also give another plug for PDES Kandahari noting our Federal Register notice for private sector delegates to the U.S. delegation, so I believe that just went out. So please do check on that regularly. We bring our private sector with us to every single COPUIS meeting, so it's a big point of pride for our delegation. I will now open it up for questions from the audience. So there's a mic going around, so please just state your name, where you're from, and keep the question to the form of a question.
Hi, I'm Tyler Bender with the Beyond Earth Institute. So the current administration, I think it's pretty clear, does not put high priority on alliances and diplomacy. But as Mike Gold said, space brings everybody together. So do you see space as an opportunity still for the United States to work with allies and even adversaries? And if so, can we use space to ease relations on Earth?
Great question. Anybody want to?
I mean, I will say, I didn't mention earlier that I served as the U.S. nominated expert on legal aspects of space resources. And I wanted to serve as that expert because I knew that some certain particular true elements of space law had to be reiterated at the international level. And I thought maybe other member states are not going to say that. So I better show up and make sure that the conversation is grounded in what is the reality of space law. Again, because those conversations are going to happen at the multilateral level, whether we're there or not. Now, to answer your question more directly, I was just at, I was in Vienna for the cislunar PNT workshop. And when we start thinking about the South Pole of the Moon, and we start thinking about who the actors are going to be at the South Pole of the Moon, it's the Americans, the Artemis partners, and it's going to be China. And if we want to do things successfully there, even our own mission assurance is dependent upon transparency and communication, even if it's on most basic elements of what frequencies we're going to be using, what our standard time model is going to be for the South Pole of the Moon, and standard gravity models for the South Pole of the Moon. Our mission assurance, Artemis mission assurance, will be assisted by sharing basic elements of that. And so, I'll just tie to that. There are real opportunities that assist us. So sometimes we do international cooperation, not because it's tied to lovely values of international cooperation, but because it's tied to what you want to do in a kind of an almost self-interested motive. You want to cooperate because you know other actors are going there and you're going to be going there. Maybe you should cooperate with them. It's the same reason you use headlights and turn signals on the freeway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's cooperation and competition, and as we look at what China's doing, while that is competitive, and we absolutely cannot cede low Earth orbit, we cannot cede the moon, and we cannot cede Mars to the Chinese, that helps bring us together. Mm-hmm. And I think, for example, Japan, the United States, it was absolutely phenomenal to see the US agree that the first non-American boots on the moon will be Japanese, and that's a great example of how we are coming together as a world to launch not just our astronauts, but our values to space, freedom, liberty, democracy. And then I think we also, from this administration, will see a stronger push on commercialization, on public-private partnerships, on business coming together. And business is inherently international. In my new position, I'm responsible for our offices in Belgium, in Luxembourg. We just opened up a new office in Poland, and we'll see the Polish astronaut up on the ISS soon. We had an event, we had space pierogies. So I think, regardless of what you might hear, and we do need to sustain programs, as I mentioned, with the very purpose of the Artemis Accords, We need to sustain Artemis. We need to sustain a presence in low Earth orbit. We need to sustain Gateway. We need to sustain the partnership. We need to be on the moon and on Mars, but we also need to win the diplomatic struggles on Earth. And we are in an existential struggle with China for hearts and minds of our partners, allies, and neutral countries. But business will bring us all together. And I very much look forward to more commercialization, which will ultimately result in more global partnerships to take advantage of space.
Kaneko, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just two things, just quick things. But, one thing is that, as Chris said, space is a province of humankind. And I think that has a lot of weight in it. It's not just saying that we have to comply with the Outer Space Treaty, but I think it's a chance, an opportunity for the space community to demonstrate that we can work together in space. And I think these demonstrations will inform the terrestrial governance regime as well. So I think the space community owes some kind of responsibility, in my opinion. You can criticize me if that's a little bit idealistic, but to me, I think that's a very bold goal for all. And then I also want to mention that the Pact for the Future was released last year from the United Nations. And in that, we specifically address the space governance piece, where we want to strengthen the international cooperation for space exploration for the peaceful use of outer space. And I think this is a very encouraging momentum that we're seeing.
And I'll just say from where I sit at the State Department, and we'll of course caveat this with the fact that a lot of things are under review, things are being reassessed, but I view it as proof of our commitment to continuing space diplomacy and engagement at the multilateral level and with our partners that, for one, I'll be heading out on Saturday night, pending one final approval, but we think that'll be coming soon, but to our COPUOS legal subcommittee, where we will be engaged in conversations on the space resource issues, space traffic management, a number of things that are really vital to U.S. priorities as well as our commercial interests. I definitely hear regularly from our commercial partners why it's important to have the U.S. delegation there to put forward things that are, common sense proposals or don't conflict with the priorities of our commercial sector or what is feasible to do by our commercial sector. And I'll also say we're still welcoming signatories of the Artemis Accords. Since the new administration came in, we have welcomed Finland and Bangladesh. We are now at 54 partners in the Artemis signatory family. So I definitely view that as positive in terms of how we plan to continue that cooperation in the space realm. We have time for one last question before we wrap it up. So if anybody would like to.
Hi again, sorry. Caroline from AIAA. So I've heard in a number of these conversations that space is special, which of course it is, but in a legal sense, in an agreement sense, how do you see these treaties as you expect them in the future to flex and evolve as human presence changes in LEO, in lunar, and then farther?
So I think an example of that was the Artemis Accords, that the Outer Space Treaty is one of the backbone, spine, the constitution of space law. But it's a treaty of principles, and we need to understand how to implement the principles of the Outer Space Treaty. I couldn't, when I was at NASA, or at Redwire for that matter, hand over the Outer Space Treaty to our engineers and say, do this, this is what you need to do. So we are going to go through what is no longer an academic exercise as we talk about iSpace landing on the surface of the moon. Very proud at Redwire to be partnered with iSpace in the pursuit of future CLPS. And I'll note that if iSpace is successful on landing on the moon, they will complete the first commercial lunar regolith purchase in the history of NASA, which I think would be extraordinarily exciting. So as we move forward with CLPS and all these other commercial and government activities, we need to implement those values with a degree of detail that hasn't existed yet. And that is the purpose of the Accords, of ATLAC and other issues, that we are going to have to take this down a level from goals and objectives to how we implement it. And per the Accords, what you were just saying with the UN, We will have our path. Others may have other ideas. Then you can go to the UN and COPUOS and maybe figure out something more permanent. But we need these structures and guidelines so that it isn't a free-for-all. And again, I believe it's very important for America to lead, not just in technology, but in policy. And that's the purpose of the Accords, in establishing constructive norms of behavior and rules of the road.
Well, and before we go to Chris to weigh in, because I would love to get some of your thoughts here, but I think we're also moving in a direction towards non-binding principles. We have, the space resource utilization principles will be non-binding, high-level guidance to allow a level of flexibility, because we can't foresee all of the technological advances that are going to come with the future of space resource utilization, exploration, and other activities. This also brings to mind the long-term sustainability of outer space guidelines that passed in 2019, and I know Secure World has done a lot of great resources there, so I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, and especially since you were around COPUOS then when they were agreed.
I mean, what I'll do, because I know time is limited,
Yeah,
I will
sure.
try and sum up, really, annexing to what Mike has said. When you look across space law, and all international law, it creates norms in three buckets. It creates freedoms, it creates obligations, meaning you must do something, or it creates prohibitions, meaning you cannot do something. So obligations, freedoms, and prohibitions. But when you look at across the entire Outer Space Treaty, okay, we have due regard, we must show due regard, and we must take actions to prevent harmful contamination, harmful interference, visitation rights, et cetera, et cetera. That gets you somewhere, but it doesn't provide enough specificity, especially when you start thinking about, in the cislunar context, permanently shadowed regions, peaks of eternal light, far side radio quiet zones. How will commerce interact with science? How can those two types of activities interact in a way which is synergistic and not antagonistic? So we need to develop a lot of clarity on how we're going to be doing those things, and very briefly, we need to do it in a way which fosters sustainability and which fosters economic development. So we should, when we look at activities, we should say, how does this engender and foster further economic activity? Does this create further clients or further actors on the moon, or is it just kind of maybe a one-off stunt that is good for national prestige but doesn't assist the next follow-on activity? This is, same activities that we would look for in urban planning. This is not a legal discussion. You talk to economists and say, well, yeah, if you're going to be doing these things, they will create industry and create follow-on activities.
I mean, our job, the job of the Accords, the job of the Outer Space Treaty, the job of State COPUOS, is to prevent conflict before it happens. And let's all rededicate ourselves to that purpose.
Kaneko, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, since we're running out of time, I'll just say a few words regarding the future challenges I see in terms of the space governance. One is that space has become an arena not just for the sovereign states, but also for the private sector, and it's just a multi-stakeholder arena. So at some point, I think we should seriously think about how the private sectors can come to the table for policy-making processes. So I think that's an important challenge we have. And then second is that the private sector innovation is really fast, is really rapid. And as I think it was Mike who said about the slow process of the COPUOS, but I think the other challenge is speed in order to how to accommodate to this innovative rapidness and how to incorporate these into the policy-making process. So I find that bringing in new stakeholders and the speed part is probably to me, is the two challenges I see.
That's a great point. Well, with that, we've got to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll turn it back over to Frank to introduce the next panel. But please join me in thanking our panelists, Chris, Mike, and Kaneko.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, gentlemen. We're reaching our third hour of this afternoon's program. Now I'd like to welcome I'm going to hop up this way, but I welcome our next panelists up here. I will be joined by Dr. Kimberly Cowell-Arkand, who is with the Smithsonian. She serves as a visualization scientist in the Emerging Tech Lead for the Center for Astrophysics. Also be joined by Colonel Raj Agrawal, who is a commander for Mission Delta II with the U.S. Space Force, and Robert LaBranche, who is the Vice President of External Affairs at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. This afternoon we're talking about international cooperation, we're talking about space diplomacy, and there are many factors that can make that difficult. There are budget concerns, there are regulatory issues. We talked a little bit about export control and ITAR. There are national security considerations. So there are lots of areas that can make that difficult. One area that is continuously ripe for cooperation, ripe for partnership, is around education and workforce development. And at Meridian, we do space exchange programs in partnership with the State Department and others. These are study tours that bring space leaders to the United States from other countries to meet with their professional counterparts. They often start here and travel to other cities. My colleague Meg Poole up here in the second row runs a lot of those programs. Within those programs, we always include a section on education and workforce development, because as we're looking at how we can partner with different countries, that is always an avenue for partnership, regardless of many of the different security and other concerns. And that is why I'm excited to be able to have this last conversation of the day, a conversation that is around STEM and education and workforce development. And while I was mentioning that in more of an international context, it's also clearly very important here at home. And the need to develop and continue to develop our own space education is a continued challenge. I know recently we've witnessed a lot of unfilled STEM jobs. There's a continuous aging tech workforce and a shortage of skilled talent. Also, recent developments are pointing towards a need to grow our homegrown talent all that much more. And so with that, this is both a fun conversation, but a really important one, and one that does relate to our national security as well as our leadership in space. And so with that, I'm very excited to welcome three panelists with very different backgrounds. All three came in from around the country, so they're in the community working on these issues and others. We have folks coming in from Rhode Island and New Mexico and Alabama. Some of us both went to the same university in Rhode Island, URI, so I need to shout that out whenever it happens. So I need to get my URI in there. Want to really just start by giving each of you a chance to share a little bit. Dr. Kimberly Archon, you're a scientist. You work with astrophysics data on everything from black holes to supernova remnants and pulsars, but you're also an educator. You are a storyteller. You are a communicator. So we'd love to hear just a bit more about how you've been bridging that and helping to inspire not just the young generations, but all generations when it comes to what's possible within space and STEM.
Well, I think you flatter me by calling me an educator. I have deep, deep respect for educators and do not consider myself in that pile at all. But I can say that I pretty much stayed in school for a very long time. So I just kept going and going and going because I loved it so much. But what I learned along the way is that the idea of mentorship, of people who would adopt you into their programs, share their lived experiences, provide guidance, like that was the part of my education that was the most important. And so I don't consider myself an educator. Being able to provide that back for people is something that is absolutely critical, and particularly in space science learning pathways, right? I did not think I was gonna end up working for a NASA mission at the Smithsonian, right? I grew up, well, I did want to be an astronaut when I was little, like our first speaker, but I pretty much learned quickly I couldn't even handle like the tilt-a-whirl. Like I am not cut out to go up into space. And so I kind of thought that was it for me because that's all I knew space was. And so for me, I think this idea of what we can do, what we can help enable in space diplomacy, space learning, STEM learning is this idea of providing mentorship, providing guidance, and providing those clear pictures of what you can do in a STEM field, how you can get there,
that space is for everyone, that STEM can be for everyone, and that there are all these shared experiences that we have, thanks to space, thanks to STEM, that can really help people along on the journey.
Thank you, and welcome. Colonel, you mentioning sort of come full circle. Currently, you lead a team of over 1,000. You have functions spread across 17 different locations. Your mission focuses on SDA, space domain awareness operations, but you're also, in this conversation at least, coming a little bit of full circle as you started out as a teacher for 8 years in high school in Texas. So would love to maybe just share a bit more about your background, and I think really well connected to today. You started the first International Office for Space at the Pentagon, and also a STEM program during COVID. So we'd love to maybe just kick us off by sharing a bit more about some of those items.
Yeah, thank you. I'm used to, for the past couple of years, in fact, I know many of you, I've been focused on generating combat power for the U.S. Space Force, and I work very closely with the Office of Space Commerce as they're working to take some of our maybe misaligned activities off of the Department of Defense and properly aligned to that office. And it's neat now to spend a little time with all of you. Thanks for staying well into rush hour in D.C. And you didn't escape early. I appreciate that. And yeah, I was a high school teacher in Texas. I taught inner city, got very familiar with broken homes and with kids that grew up maybe without both parents, and where we had drive-by shootings, and teachers really didn't stick it out for very long because of how dangerous it was to teach in those schools. And I really came to love education, not because of the curriculum, but because of the impact it could have on individual lives. And a lot of my students to this day, I mean, it's been 30 years, a little bit over 30 years that I've gotten to see them grow up and have children and have successful lives that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have had if they didn't have a classroom and a teacher that was willing to stay after and drive them home and whatever it took to make sure that they got through a day. And when I joined the military, I got to be a teacher as well in the military. Certainly many of you that have served or have been around military operations, we have instructors, we have educational kind of programs. I've been through 4 master's programs and a PhD in the military, so education is very not only important for the military because we want to be principled wielders of combat power, but that we also have inherently education in our service. One of the things that we discovered when we stood up the U.S. Space Force was that we were seeing a decline in the investment in STEM education, or at least people wanting to pick up STEM as a path for their careers. And we're so dependent on industry, we're so dependent on our international partners to be able to bring capability and make it available to the U.S. military, and that was diminishing domestically. And so when we stood up the service, I was part of the team to help lead the stand-up, and then the next year I was put in charge of the first birthday. And that was during the COVID shutdown, lockdowns, and we wanted to do a number of things, put a hallway together in the Pentagon for the Space Force, commission an astronaut from the Air Force into the Space Force. We did a lot of neat things, but what we wanted to do was, what's our thing that we do in the Space Force to celebrate every year? And then 3-star General Saltzman said, hey, Raj, it'd be really great if we didn't do the normal run and cutting of a cake. Can we do something that maybe is more Space Force? And we couldn't go anywhere. We were locked in our homes for the most part. But we came up with this idea of, what if we use video telecommunication to connect with students that are also locked in their homes and teach them about space? And every year, first of all, that year we tried it. We had to partner with a few schools. Being a former high school teacher helped because I knew a lot of folks in that community. And we tried it, and then General Raymond loved it. He's like, Raj, I want that to happen in every state before the first birthday. And we had just started at 3 weeks before the first birthday, and now he wanted to reach 50 states. And we came up with some incentives and got everybody excited. And we did. We reached all 50 states. We got, I think it was 12,000 students that we reached, multiple countries, and it became a thing that now is called STEM to Space. The Air Force picked it up as well, and they do a STEM to Air, and now every year is part of the Space Force birthday. We do that. We visit with students around the country and the world to get them excited about STEM. So that's a little bit, I'm sorry for talking so long, but
no,
that's a little bit about
it's exciting.
my background. Yeah.
It's a great way to bring in so many people during COVID.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was very fulfilling because I got to kind of relive that high school experience. And after this assignment, when I'm done with command, I come to National Defense University. I'll be the service chair, Space Force chair at National Defense University. So I'll get to kind of be an educator again for a little while. It's been a fun time. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Robert, you're joining us from Huntsville and with the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, but you've worked at the intersection of communication and national security in space for a while now. So we'd love to maybe share a bit more about that, but also just all the things happening at the Rocket Center. I haven't been there yet with my kids, but that's the next place I want to go.
Yes.
And so we'd love to hear a bit more about some of that.
Absolutely, and for Natalie earlier, we do have adult space camp, and you are invited, so, and you all are. So I'm Robert LeBranch, I'm Vice President for External Affairs at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville. We're the home of Space Camp, which is the largest and longest running STEM camp in the world. We have 16 flown astronauts to our credit, including one, Nicole Ayers, who is on the International Space Station right now, and another one who will have his first flight, Christopher Williams, in November. And so we're very excited about that. But a little bit about me. I'm a recovering DC denizen, and it's always good to be back home-ish with you here. I will say that a lot of the good words have been used up now that we're sort of towards the end of the day. But I will say that I need to steal back the Forrest Gump of a career from Sean, because that is how I describe what I do. And I'm from Alabama, and so I'm going to claim that back. So I've had the opportunity to work on both the Senate side and the House side, and also for authorizers and appropriators, and finished my career with John Culberson of Texas, who became the chairman of the CJS subcommittee. And so, you know, watching the Europa launch, if some of you know of his affinity for that, was truly inspiring for me. I actually got to watch it in Disney World with my kids, Henry and Clara, and my wife Bindi, as it went up over Mission Space. So pro tip, if you're in Central Florida, go over to Mission Space and see if you can watch a launch. So it's pretty good. But so 8 years here on the Hill, moved back to Huntsville in 2014. Started working for NASA, did a stint as a consultant on the Space Launch System Program Office in communications. And then, and several other items, helped out with the state of Alabama's Alabama Military Stability Foundation, where we are still hoping to hear a Space Command announcement sometime, maybe soon. So excited about that. And then in 2021, when you are around Huntsville, you know the Space and Rocket Center well. You drive past it every day because the rocket looms large. If you don't know and you haven't been, we have a 2-scale model of the Saturn V. It is incredible, and it's a beacon for STEM workforce engagement. It is an icon for the state of Alabama. And in 2021, due to COVID, we were nearly out of business. We had lost 90% of our staff, over $50 million in revenue. And my first boss at NASA, Dr. Kimberly Robinson, a different Dr. Kimberly, was tapped as the CEO of the Space and Rocket Center. And I went to see her as she was clearing out her desk, and I said, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'm going to help. I want to help somehow. And so for 6 months, I volunteered. And then I came on as a consultant, and then 2 years ago became Vice President for External Affairs, put away the rest of the consulting business. It is such a wonderful thing, and we have come out of COVID running. And we've opened a new building, which we opened thanks to some support from the state of Alabama and many of you here in the room, without an ounce of debt to that building. It was a $20 million project. And we have another building coming out of the ground, thanks to another one of our astronauts who is hopefully going to get a vote tomorrow in the Commerce Committee to be your NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman. He came to Aviation Challenge as a 12-year-old child and still credits Space Camp for where he is today. Another one of our astronauts, Christina Cook, will be the first woman to fly a lunar mission. And so you can't not love Space Camp. It is just such a wonderful place. And you know, to sort of echo what Jared said in his announcement when he on X when he was selected, you know, he and I were both born after Apollo, and our children were born after shuttle landed. And so it is so important that we make sure that our children, I have a 7-year-old daughter named Clara and a 10-year-old son named Henry, and it's so important to show them that we're going to go out and do mighty things, and we don't do that without American leadership.
Thanks, Robert. That's a great track record for the Space Camp. Dr. Arkin, you've said that space is a gateway into STEM overall, and it can help open opportunities in AI and emerging tech and other areas. Can you share a bit more about that?
Well, it's space and dinosaurs. I mean, those are kind of like the two big things that are gateways, right? But I think for a lot of folks, it's not always obvious, but astronomy runs on coding. A lot of space science runs on coding. And the capability of bringing in students through technology, which is such a baseline of the modern economy, the modern workforce, 21st century jobs, this idea of having folks who are comfortable with coding or with basic computer science principles, or honestly just data literacy, because it's about critical thinking. It's about being able to understand the truths and the falses, and it's really about, honestly, creativity. And I say that, by the way, the idea of computer science and coding, and data literacy, not at the expense of other creative fields either, because I'm a strong believer that you can't just have one. You also need to have folks that bring talents from different languages, English language, arts, music, art, and other creative fields, because you can think of design thinking and universal design and how much that can really improve what we do in space science, what we do in astronomy and astrophysics. So yeah, I really think it's an important gateway, because that's honestly how I got involved, right? I was in science, but I was in molecular bio, and I didn't want to look through a microscope for the rest of my career. I dropped by my computer science department. They kind of adopted me. I learned how to code, and 2 years later, I was working for a NASA mission. It was a very easy pipeline, because that skill required, that computer science background was so essential.
Robert, you, I think the Rocket Center is a great example of sort of that space being a gateway into STEM, but you're also a physical location. And I'm curious, you know, what can the Rocket Center, I think the Colonel gave a great example for this, wasn't expecting that, but what can the Rocket Center and others do to make these opportunities more accessible, both to kids, not just around the United States, but also around the world?
Well, you know, the barriers to STEM education in general and to the Space and Rocket Center are many and varied. And you think about the fact that, you know, I'll give an example. You know, Dr. Arkin mentioned earlier, we have actually done a collaboration, not she and I, but her organization and my organization, on a special camp. It's one of my favorite weeks all year, where we bring sight-impaired, visually impaired students to Space Camp. And we have what's called SciVis. And so we have visually impaired campers who get to be normal for the week and get to have Braille all over everything. We put pool noodles on every sharp surface, so they don't run into things, and if they do, it doesn't hurt them. But one of the things that her team did was create 3D printed models of things like the pillars of the universe and the Crab Nebula and Carina, I think it was, to make sure that while they can't experience the majesty of the intuitive planetarium in the way that everyone else does, they can still experience that planetary science. They can still experience that data made into something that is relatable to them. And that's so important. And so Alabama is a state that has very rural and urban. We have very poor and well-to-do. What we have found is we have this program for the state of Alabama. It's funded, we're a state agency, by the way, started in the 1960s when Werner von Braun went down to the legislature and asked them to create a museum. And he later went down and asked them to create a camp so that we could do STEM education. You know, we have this program where 2 students from each legislative district, state legislative district in the state of Alabama can come to Space Camp for free every year. And it's hard to give it away sometimes, because what we see is that it's not always an economic barrier. And it's not always a geographical barrier. Sometimes it's a psychological barrier. And what we have to do is, you know, we have children that will grow up in the shadow of the rocket and never come see us, and that's a tragedy. And so what we have to understand is that our responses to the challenges have to be many and varied, because the challenges are many and varied. And so we have to go see people where they are. We have to bring people to us. And we have to repackage and reshare and provide access to people and meet them where they are.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Colonel, you know, you're looking at this through a national security and a defense lens, and so I'm curious, how can we better align some of these STEM programs to meet some of our national security, meet some of our global economic competitiveness, and some of our other needs in that area?
I mean, that's a good question. You know, whenever I think about this, and I really appreciate your perspective, that the combination of the arts and sciences is really what arrives at, for us, at least in the military, we talk about the art and science of military operations. In fact, we have degrees focused on what it means to do, you know, prescribed the science of military operations, and then what does it take to overlay that and say, to arrive at outcomes that you can't science your way through, but that have to be imagined. And what's unique about the American way of life is that we are projecting our values through the technology that we employ. And so I'm an operator, like, and that's what I've grown up in the military. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a you know, I don't do acquisitions. I have to interface with the technology that's given to me, and I have to apply the principles, the values, the ethics, the policy that many of you create for us. We have to live within that, and then we take that technology and project national interest through it. And that is often what we fail to do when we're creating technology for Americans, is to think through the nexus of the American human and the technology that they're using. Because everything that we have in space today is some projection of national interest. Some nation is putting what they believe to be in their interest into space, whether that's through their industry or academia or government interest. And that's where the conflict occurs. It's not that war in space is inevitable, because it isn't, just as war is not inevitable here on Earth. But certainly it's the projection of that technology. And so when we hear about the possibility of Russia deploying a nuclear capability in space, that is in no one's interest, but that is a projection of their national interest that's in conflict with ours. Mm-hmm. When the Chinese deploy technology, experimental technology that can kill our satellites, and continue to not adhere to what they say they adhere to, which are global norms, but they continue to do things that are counter to that. Those are projections of national interest. And so as we think through how we generate American talent that interfaces with STEM, we've got to have principled Americans that understand our values, that believe in our nation and what we stand for, and that when they generate capability and power, it is to protect those values, and ideally to partner with like-minded nations and get them to have this industry, a space industry that can generate capability that when we work together, we can sustain a secure space environment that we can all benefit from. And so I think we're all after the same things, but but it does start very early. You know, as we're talking about when it comes to the imagination, many children, depending on how they've grown up, like in my home, in an Asian home, my parents imagined maybe one of three maybe professions, right? Engineer, doctor, lawyer. And so that's ingrained in us. I didn't do any of those things. And that's ingrained in us so that our imagination is already geared in a particular direction. So we believe that to be possible and probable. Where there are other families in America that only imagine their current condition as the limit of what they can, you know, achieve. And anything beyond that is ridiculous. It's not only that, hey, that isn't for me. It's, no, that is ridiculous for you to even think about. And so as educators and as Americans, we've got to figure out a way to incentivize or inspire the imagination of all Americans to believe this is possible, regardless of what limits they believe are posed upon them.
This afternoon, we've been talking a lot about industry. And we know they have also an important role in STEM education. You can look at things like apprenticeships and internships. To what extent are any of you collaborating with the private sector? And if you have any examples of where this is working, we would love to hear that. But also maybe if there are some gaps where areas where you wish industry was doing more, that would be probably equally as helpful. And that's for anyone.
Sure, I'd be happy to start on that. We partner with industry a lot and often and frequently, and we're so grateful for that, both in terms of funding, but then also in terms of programs. You know, I can think of a couple of really great collaborations we have with Honeywell, where they send students from around the world in their workforce, and then also Booz Allen does some work with our teachers, and that's the other thing, the sort of hidden benefit at Space Camp is that we also have Educator Camp, which when you talk to one educator, you're talking to thousands of children over their career. And so, you know, we would love to see more partnerships. We would love to see, honestly, what's been very difficult for us has been getting hardware. And models and things like that of the new space items, and certain partners like Axiom have been fantastic. We've got 2 Blue Origin engines that are actually a BE-4 that arrives this weekend, I believe. We've got a BE-3U already that gets tested at Marshall Space Flight Center, and the workforce will sign it and send it over. It's wonderful. But the more of that we can show our space campers, the better. You know, we have 30,000 to 40,000 kids that are going to come see us every year. They come from around the world, over 70 countries last year. And so making sure that we're able to tell your story at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center is really important to us.
I'm being asked to jump to Q&A, but are there any other examples of where you would hope industry might do more?
I'd love to just sort of jump in that I think it would be great to have more partnership with industry to fill in some of the gaps so that there's more of a sustained learning pathway versus just one and done, right? Where it's a little bit more collaborative, more cohesive, more holistic, and you can really demystify what those pathways might be. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add, but.
No, I mean, most of you that know me, I meet with hundreds of industry partners a month, and when I go to conferences, it's usually back to back. You know, I think I'm the mission area commander for space domain awareness, and so that is where the preponderance of at least military-focused space industry looks to is our command. I think the thing that I've told everyone when I meet with them, especially small businesses, is if you've set your business case up so that the U.S. government's your only customer, you've set yourself up for failure, and you've actually set the U.S. government up for failure. You've got to create business cases that have multiple sources of profit, and you've got to, if you optimize your focus on where profit lies outside of government influence, then policy shifts and these kinds of things that occur every 4 to 8 years won't put you at risk, and therefore won't put us at risk if we're in business with you. But I think to apply it to this conversation, it seems to me that if industry were focused on creating opportunities for STEM education that would get after areas that the public school education is not getting after, those are easy on-ramps for talent and to generate a workforce that's available to you, that knows your name, that believes that you have, that you're interested in their success. And I feel like it's a lot cheaper an investment than some of the other tools I'm using for recruitment.
Thank you. We're going to head to the audience for questions, comments.
Hi, good afternoon. Che Bolden with the Bolden Group and InterAstra. I found all three of your comments to be very insightful. As someone who did grow up in the shadow of one of those rockets, one of the things I can explain or try to help explain is that it's a very technical field, and a lot of people are intimidated by that. And so my question relies on the fact that, Colonel, you started to get to it a little bit. There's going to be more trade skill requirements with the commercialization of space that there are for knowledge skill. What efforts are you all doing to partner up with JUCOs, associate degrees, trade schools, and the like, and showing them opportunities in the business of space as we move forward?
I think that's a limitation for the Department of Defense right now from a policy perspective. And I'm not, I wear the uniform, I have a rank, I have a position, so I don't do policy, but I work within it. But right now, at least for the officer corps, you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree to even be considered to be an officer. But in the U.S. Space Force, we're getting to where the enlisted corps are our warfighters, and the officers are more of the planners, the integrators, the leaders. And so I think when it comes to how do we incentivize trade school, first of all, as opposed to, or at least in competition with college education, I'm seeing industry do that already. I don't remember the name of the company that came out and said, hey, we want to hire you without a degree, and I think that would be compelling for those that see college as an impediment to their success, or at least a limitation. And if someone were to come and say, hey, I don't want you to go to college, I want you to come to us and we're going to train you to do your job. I don't know how you get tested for that kind of aptitude, but I think there's something there that the U.S. military, the Department of Defense might consider looking into. Is how do we not just teach them how to march and fold their clothes and salute properly, but what if coding, these trades, are part of basic training? And we gain a guardian into the U.S. Space Force that knows the basics of how to interface with technology and end up with some certifications, so that when they leave the U.S. Space Force, they now help you guys in industry with experience and certification. So there's something there, but I can't answer and say that we are doing that. I just think that's an interesting proposition.
Yeah, I'll offer a little bit to that also. We have a program called the Alabama Aerospace Fellowship that we are standing up alongside with Lockheed Martin, who's been engaged in this for quite some time, and then Boeing, who's come alongside us as well, and showing them, like bringing high school kids into factories and showing them the jobs that are available. Because yes, you need engineers. Yes, you need PhDs, but you need way more technicians. You need way more welders. You need way more folks that can tie wire harnesses and turn screws and all of that. And so when people go, well, this is just doing this work that I understand, but on a rocket, it makes a difference. And the pride that people take, we actually, it's an interesting pipeline right now. Because we have a lot of automotive in the state of Alabama, actually more automotive in Alabama now than in Detroit, and we're very proud of that. And there's been a really interesting shift from some of our automotive into companies like Blue Origin that are building engines in Huntsville now. And so there's quite a train over from Mazda Toyota manufacturing, for instance, to Blue Origin because their skills are transferable.
So I want to get a couple more questions. Maybe we'll combine a few to make sure we get to a few. But I see one up here. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask?
So it's really more a comment as opposed to a question, because Shay, you brought up a really good point. So I'm Megan Allen, I'm with the Space Foundation, and a lot of people don't realize the Space Foundation is actually a nonprofit organization whose main priority is to inspire and prepare and lead the next generation of space guys. And so partnering with industry is critical. Two things to note: that next week, actually it's this week, oh my goodness, Friday is National Space Day. So we put a resolution through the House and Senate last year that declared Friday, the first Friday in May, National Space Day. And so getting information out into the school system so that people know it's not just about STEM, it's about inspiring, and you gotta grab these kids when they're little, so K through 6 is the main priority. But then putting that onus on industry, we have over 40 industry partners, and getting ads out, right, so that people understand that you don't have to go to college. You can go to a JUCO or a trade school and become a welder and, you know, like go make $100,000 your first year working on aircraft or something. But it's just, we have to see ourselves as stewards of carrying that message and getting it to the non-traditional players, because we talk to each other so much. We don't talk outside our lanes, and we got to start doing that more.
And one of the challenges is you also have to get after the parents, you know, the guardians that are at home. I mean, I'm talking about not us guardians of kids at home, because a lot of times kids might come back home with an idea and excitement, but then it's kind of crushed at home because they don't have that support at home to believe in that thing. So I don't know how to get there, but that's something that, but I appreciate everything that Space Foundation does, Air and Space Association, Space Forces Association, a lot of folks that, associations out there that are getting after this problem with us. Appreciate that.
Yeah. We have a great program with Minority Leader Anthony Daniels from our state legislature and Representative Laura Hall, who represent some of the communities that do grow up in that shadow of the rocket that may not see us. And they've started a program called 5G. It's girls, guys, gigabytes, and grandparents. And so actually 5G, sorry, gadgets, missed that one. Terrible order. It's okay. But what they do is they bring parents and grandparents in to talk to them about, you know, what they're telling the children so that they can reinforce at home. And actually one of the most popular things that we do there is Leo, who is one of our cyber educators, because we have Space Camp, but we also have Aviation Challenge, Cyber Camp, and Robotics Camp. So Leo, who's one of our educators, gives the grandparents a cyber hygiene lesson, which is really transformational for them and actually could save them a lot of money and heartache later. So.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question. I know some of folks have to hop back on a plane, but we've got maybe in 3 sentences or less for each of you. We'll end on a bright note, but what gives you the most optimism when it comes to space education and workforce development? Kick us off?
Gosh. Well, first, that the universe belongs to everyone, right? And there are multiple inroads to being part of the scientific enterprise and the space enterprise. And particularly when I'm seeing with emerging and advancing tech, for example, there's tremendous opportunity. So I am very hopeful about that.
For me, it's been the incredible influx of passion for space in the international community and in industry. Space has come alive in the last 5 years that I don't think I would have imagined when I was an airman in the U.S. Air Force. And that when we stood up the U.S. Space Force, when we had a number of industry partners that kind of broke barriers, and we saw the world come alive. That, I think, has inspired the hearts and minds of the American people towards space in a way that is resulting in things like today that did not exist 6 years ago. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd echo that. We are in a new golden age of space exploration, and our children are here for it. They're all excited, you know, and the sort of zeitgeist is following it, and that's so encouraging to watch as folks get excited about a Europa Clipper launch, or they get excited about you know, a booster catch, or anything like that. You know, there's so many cool things to look at. And to be inspired by, and so that's what makes me optimistic.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom in this last panel. All right, we're heading into the home stretch here, so it's now my pleasure to welcome to the podium for closing remarks the Associate Administrator of the Office of International and Interagency Relations at NASA, Associate Administrator Karen Feldstein. Welcome.
Thank you. So when I speak, I like to weave in a little bit of what I hear, but I didn't plan on zeitgeist, so I'll choose traffic, which is just to say I heard the Colonel mention that it's already too late, so you might as well sit for a few more minutes. So it's a pleasure to join you to wrap up what sounded like a really interesting dialogue today. I clocked, Caitlin, you mentioning earlier you just don't want to talk to only government agencies and space agencies. I heard that, but I think it was terrific here to hear from so many different voices, and also to see among so many friends in the room government, industry, and representatives from civil society. So I hope this was a very engaging day for you today. So coming in late, it really feels like summer outside. It's amazing. We're only 1 month into spring, but it's been a really whirlwind time for NASA and for our efforts in space diplomacy and to promote U.S. industry in this domain. So we kicked off in April at Space Symposium, of course, meeting with our partners all around the world. And I'll say that it was a bit of an unusual time, I thought, to have symposium while we're waiting in the waiting period for our administrator to come on board. But I'll talk a little bit more about how that turned out. So we had Space Symposium first. We had astronaut Johnny Kim launch to the space station aboard Soyuz with his Russian crewmates, and Don Pettit came home with his Russian crewmates on his 70th birthday, by the way, which you've probably heard. We had a very successful civil space dialogue with the Republic of Korea. As Caitlin mentioned a couple panels ago as well, we had Bangladesh become the 54th signatory of the Artemis Accords, committing to those principles you've heard so much about today. And last week, I attended the opening of the African Space Agency in Cairo, together with colleagues from the State Department and from Commerce and representatives from numerous American companies. So as I said, I thought it would be an unusual time at Space Symposium, but there and through all of the things I just mentioned, I was really struck by how pervasive the theme was, and I'm talking about hearing from our partners, that partnership matters, that cooperation matters. If any of you were at the Global Collaboration event there, you heard me reflecting on this in real time, but that the strength of our partnership remains paramount in every domain: civil, commercial, military, low Earth orbit, deep space. That American leadership, the focus of today's 3 panels that you heard, derives through strength in pursuing our common objectives. I heard one of the speakers say that diplomacy is good for business. And we certainly believe that in asserting American leadership in space and doing our part as really the premier space agency in the world, as we have throughout the decades, we're creating that environment in which commercial space activities can flourish, building enthusiasm among stakeholders, stimulating investment, strengthening bilateral relationships that at the end of the day fuel and feed the customer base for what our industry is trying to accomplish. I traveled to Cairo because U.S. Ambassador Hero Mustafa Garg wrote to me to say that NASA's presence would be absolutely crucial for furthering the U.S. Economic objectives that were being pursued in that region. And in fact, NASA's presence at that inauguration and at the New Space Conference that followed was extremely well received. My takeaway was that it was obvious that that enormous market on the continent is absolutely in play for U.S. companies, those who traveled there and are pursuing those lines of business. And I don't have to point out to such a sophisticated group of people here today, but of course being a global leader in space also drives innovation here at home, allowing us not only to grow our space economy, but to leverage and grow the strengths of the private sector, companies and institutions to further broader goals. Because of course the technologies we're developing for exploration, as we talked about in Africa quite a bit, as we develop those technologies together with U.S. industry, we're experiencing breakthroughs that we couldn't have imagined when we started out to create industries and transform lives. So at NASA, we often say international cooperation is in our DNA. Everybody likes to talk about the Space Act of 1950, whatever. But I have often said we don't cooperate for cooperation's sake, and neither do our partners. And I think that message has never been truer to emphasize today than it's been in the past. We collaborate, of course, because it's in our national interest. It's consistent with our national priorities and objectives, and it fuels our respective space economies. And we at NASA do this in service to our own mission. We say yes when mutual interests align, that is our place in this ecosystem. And then I really like to reflect on countries like Bangladesh deciding to sign the Artemis Accords. They clearly chose to do that because they perceived it was in their national interest to have a seat at the table in establishing the rules of the road and helping to reduce the risk and uncertainty that is so important to a thriving commercial space sector. And of course, it was easy to see, being in Africa, which is only at the beginning, really of pursuing the promise of space in such an enormous way. 55 member nations of the African Union coming together with the backdrop of a space sector that's evolving so very quickly. Commercial companies, of course, landing hardware on the moon, CLIPS, sovereign nations buying human spaceflight opportunities from companies, and we're about to see another private astronaut mission with representatives from 3 sovereign nations partnering on commercial LEO destinations, commercial solutions for orbital debris removal. These are extraordinary innovations matched by novel partnership opportunities as we think about space diplomacy fueling cooperation in new ways. Government to government, of course, industry to industry, more than ever, but also new paradigms that will reflect the kind of innovation we're seeing in those activities on the moon and Mars. And of course, reflecting on the panels of earlier as well, I loved the comment that you can't hand somebody the outer space treaty and say, go do this. And I think the same is true for our longstanding ways of doing business for international partnering. Some of those models will be critical to continuing what we want to accomplish, and then others will need to evolve as we go. So as we venture to the moon and Mars and beyond, we'll continue to work together with our commercial partners and our international partners to leverage resources and expertise and best practices, and then use those discoveries we make to continue to power technology advancements, create jobs, and inspire the breakthroughs of tomorrow. So I'll just close with the message that I've seen again and again over only the few weeks of April, that international cooperation matters, that space diplomacy is so important for promoting U.S. leadership in space and for achieving our respective national objectives that we choose to define in our own ways. And while it may take different forms with different partners at different times, it absolutely remains essential. So thank you again for the opportunity to close you out today. I look forward to continuing to advance U.S. leadership from NASA's part of the world and to furthering our shared goals together with all of you. So thank you.
I saw on LinkedIn some of the images of you in Cairo, and excited to welcome you back here today. Space is different today than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now every nation has an opportunity to be part of the space sector, and they are looking for ways to do that. For the United States to maintain our leadership in space, it's vitally important that we are partnering with them, because if we don't partner with them, we know other nations will, and that could lead a generation where we might not be able to partner with them again. So at Meridian, that's the core of our space diplomacy initiative, to unleash as many partnerships as we can, whether that's between business, between governments, or public-private partnerships. And I know that's also what many of you in the room are focused on as well. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, and let us advance American leadership through partnership.